Is it snowing yet? Is it snowing in Richmond?
Straight ice, dude.
Yeah, all it did
Our
today
guest
was just...
is probably like, why does this dude have on a toboggan? Because she is in a much warmer climate than me. But
Yes.
It's about 25 degrees out, and we're
Yes.
supposed to get like an inch of ice.
Yeah, real cold here. It rained just like water that froze almost immediately as it hit the ground almost all afternoon. So like cars on the street were just like encased in like a half-inch layer of ice, and it's annoying. Either snow but 2 feet or leave me alone. All right.
The beautiful part is that through the age of technology, I can like work from home, and we can do stuff like this from home. So
hell, I'm already working from home every day right now.
We're finding ways to stay occupied.
Yeah, you've been going into the office the whole time with COVID. I've been at home since last March at this point. So
yeah,
but let's get right into it today. So welcome everyone to the Aged Out Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me as always is
Evan Worrell.
And before we get into letting Evan introduce today's awesome guest, hit the subscribe button, like, comment on the YouTube video if that's where you're watching. Follow us on all podcast services. Well, major ones, not all of them, but like Google, Spotify, Apple, they're all there. Hit up LoneStarPercussion.com as we have partnered with them to bring you a discount code to save $10 on any order of $50 or more. I mean, you buy a pair of mallets and you're already there if you're a front ensemble person or... Yeah, it's nuts. So take advantage of that. Helps them, helps us, helps you. Everybody wins. Check patreon.com/agedoutpodcast if you want to support us financially at all. Give us $1 or $2 a month. It all helps us out. We have some goals for the podcast that it'll help us reach. And did I get it all, Evan?
I think so. Did you say the actual code for Lone Star?
Oh, the actual code is aged out. No spaces. It'll be in the video description and the podcast description on the services. Thank you for that. I don't write this down. It's all off my brain. You know, it's a lot at this point. So, Evan, just take it and stop me from rambling.
Yeah, it's improv. It's all good. So, yeah, our guest today graciously joined us just through a message sending out. She was able to carve out some time to join us. So, without further ado, welcome Lauren Teel. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And also very impressive info. I would not say it as well as you guys just did.
Well, we have many experiences stumbling across ourselves, just like with this activity, many bad reps to produce good ones. So I'm sure we can all relate to that. Well, cool. But yeah, Lauren, we'll just get into it, allow you to kind of take us through your upbringing of percussion, music, the arts, how you were introduced to the activity, some influence, inspirations, and go for it.
Absolutely. You know, I think I came out of the womb holding drumsticks a little bit. My dad was a snare drummer at JSU back in the day, and so there were like home videos of me sitting in front of the TV swinging drumsticks around.
Heck yeah.
Cadets from 1992. But you know what's funny is you look at the video and I'm twirling it around. It's a lot more rotation and not so much turning your wrist. So I think I knew from an early age I'd be playing some mallets.
You were destined.
Destined for the front ensemble. Sorry, Dad.
It's in your DNA.
Yeah, but you know, like from a young age, I was introduced to the activity, drum corps in particular. My dad would always kind of drag me along to some of the shows since I was like 7, I want to say. But it wasn't until I was maybe 12 that I really started to like appreciate what was going on. You know, it's about the time we all get into it in middle school. And, you know, I think I was fortunate in being in some really great schools. I grew up in the DFW area in Texas and went to Capella High School and had some really phenomenal teachers. You know, I don't know if he would claim me as his student, but Alan Miller actually came in 2 years into my high school time and really changed the way I play, I think, for the better, which ultimately helped, I think, open the door for me to go on and be a music major. And another big influence, I want to say, from my undergrad was Mike Hodges, seriously killer quad player. He was my private lesson teacher. And I remember just thinking, like, as a high schooler, like, man, that guy's got it figured out. Like, teaches drumline, he plays in a band, and, like, teaches...
Living the dream.
I was like, that's the dream right there. I'm going to do that. So, you know, obviously, the goals have changed as I've grown. But back in my high school days, that was really the epitome of, like, that's what I'm going to do. And so, you know, through those connections and just kind of being in the DFW area, there were a lot of drum corps shows that happened. I kind of really was around it a lot. And I think the really turning point was 2007 at San Antonio and that lot, watching the Phantom Regiment live, just like...
Great show.
Oh my God, the music! Like, and I remember, there was a guy on the high school snare line with me that he had been auditioning for Phantom Regiment that year, and he kept telling me like, "Oh, you got to check out the show. Like, the music's serious." And like, I'll be honest, like before then, like I was kind of a Blue Devils fan. I was a little bit of Cavaliers, before I was in that. But then the way he talked about that '07 group, and then getting to see it in person, kind of sealed the deal. And I tried in '08. The Spartacus show didn't quite make the cut, but it definitely lit a fire under my butt. And I like to joke that the only reason I still do drum corps is because I will never let go of not making that '08 group and getting to win DCI. But yeah. I think that was like a big influence then, and is now, is just my experience with drum corps. The first camp I went to in '08, I met a lot of students, and I remember having the feeling of like, this is something I want to be a part of. And it had a serious impact on me. And I remember looking around the room and noticing a lot of folks went to UNT, and that kind of, pushed me in that direction too. I'd looked at places like UT, TCU, JSU, the connection with my dad, but just going to that camp kind of solidified my decision that like, I think UNT is where I want to be. And I'm so thankful for all of those experiences it gave me. I can't tell you how many opportunities I can tie back to that decision to march at Phantom Regiment and to be at UNT.
Absolutely.
It kind of, everything kind of comes one step at a time. But I marched 2 years at Phantom Regiment, and then went over to Vanguard in 2011, which was probably one of my favorite shows ever to play. The music was just unlike anything else we'd played. It's definitely the hardest book to learn. And that was the
Devil's Staircase show, right?
Staircase, yeah. Which
it's aggressive.
It was very aggressive, but there was one show, we had this like voiceover. This is like the dawn of like the pre-show voiceover type thing. And we had this one show, and I couldn't tell you where it was, but the guy gets on, and they had this like really like ominous, like, imagine you're in hell, can't get out. But this one show in particular, this guy gets on and goes, imagine you're in hell and can't get out. And it was like,
that's like an anchor man, Ron Burgundy. Like, who put a question mark in the teleprompter?
I'm Ron Burgundy.
It's like, oh, okay. But yeah,
that's awesome.
Definitely an aggressive show compared to, the year before I had done like the Into the Light show, which had a soft ending. And I remember, I'll be honest, when I heard we were doing a soft ending, I was like, oh, really? Come on. But it ended up being a pretty special show in its own merit. And I think the older I get, the more I appreciate what that was. But 2011, if you ask me, that's the year that I really remember. And there were some great players in that group too that I'm lucky to still call my friends and that have gone on to do amazing things.
Can we talk for a second while you bring up Vanguard 11? Just like, what was being a part of a complete staff overhaul change in a drum corps like? Did it feel different to you? Was it, because obviously you followed Paul and Sandy from Phantom to Vanguard. Like, were there a lot of, like, how many vets were were still there from 10 to 11 through the staff change, out of curiosity?
I believe in the front, so I marched in the front ensemble. Through there, there was a vibraphone player and a percussionist that stayed from the previous year. And then, I'm trying to remember, obviously, I think most of the cymbal line was alumni. And then I think maybe one bass drummer. If I can, like, don't quote me on that. I'm trying to remember.
That's fine.
No, you're good.
Is that stretching you back?
Like, is that, I've not really ever looked into, like, it's obviously staffs move around all the time throughout drum corps history and jump ship from one to another and then go back sometimes and blah, blah, blah. Is that typical, you think? Like, just almost a complete member swap over? Or was that just, like,
I think
unique?
Maybe, I don't know if it's unique or not. I can speak to my experience. I know that what that group was at Phantom Regiment, I think part of why it's so successful is because we are all on the same page about, like, what the goal is. It's a group effort. And it's fun to be with your friends and play at a high. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think it was an easy decision when it came, when Paul did decide to move teams. He didn't have to ask any of us to do that. Like, he didn't approach any of us and say, like, hey, follow me to here. We all chose to do that.
Yeah.
I think it was just because we all really believed in him and the staff and the music that we played. And, my perception was that, like, as far as, like, the percussion section goes, it felt like business as usual. It just felt like we were wearing a different uniform.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference was maybe like the core propers culture was a little bit different. Obviously Regiment has its own identity, and Vanguard has a equally unique and different identity. I think one of the biggest things I remember was just at Regiment, and I'm sure it's not like this now, but at Regiment we would stay up all night on camp weekends and like kind of hype it, learning the music and seeing how clean we could get it by Sunday. Like that was like, yeah, we're gonna like be so excited. Like we would stay up all night. It was totally in our hands. And that Sunday recording was like that was like always the goal. It was like we want to walk away and be like, yeah, okay, that sounds we're ready to go. And we got to Vanguard, there were some pretty like clear rules about like 11 p.m. like we're done. Like nobody's and I remember being like, well, how are we gonna get the music right? Like we have to confused by like, what do you mean we can't keep playing? Like I want to play. It's awesome. And I see where they're coming from, like the whole thought. And I think this is kind of indicative of like the whole trend that has been the last decade in DCI, where there's like a lot more awareness about the full health of the member and everything like that.
Definitely.
That was definitely like a huge shift in culture. And I don't think necessarily one was better than the other. I think there were merits to both, but it just took me a minute. Like those were the things that I remember being like, whoa, that's different. But as far as the way we played together and we operated as a section, it's just a different uniform and a different tour. It's great to see the West Coast.
Oh, I'm sure.
I bet another big difference is that you had a much more scenic move-ins housing site going from like Rockford, Beloit, Wisconsin area to California.
I'll tell you, there's some pictures out there of that move-ins that year. It actually snowed, and I remember just like being totally unprepared, like from a clothing standpoint, and being like an ensemble, just like, what are we doing? Why is it snowing? California, but it was very beautiful. Like waking up every morning to see Mount Shasta, like having like a marimba sectional, looking at this like beautiful scenery. Like yeah, it was a really phenomenal experience, and I'm thankful that was my last year as a member. I think that regardless of I don't even remember where we ended up placement wise, but like I like always will go back and listen to that show. So
yeah, it was a great show.
I'm definitely jealous of the West Coast tour. We thought for like half a minute Bluecoats were going to do a West Coast tour in 2012.
Yeah.
Did not end up happening, and sadly we did the exact same tour I did at Blue Stars in 2010. Like we stayed at some housing sites at Bluecoats in 12. I got off the bus at 3 a.m. and was like, I've been here before. Like we just felt it's wild.
Yeah, like I know where I am, but I don't know. Like I don't know what location, but I've definitely been here. And
no, like it was the same school. Like the Bluecoats housed at the same school that the Blue Stars did 2 years prior for whatever show in Wisconsin or Illinois, wherever the hell we were.
It's like a mix of deja vu / PTSD that you're just such a weird feeling. But
I'm not joking. I got off the bus and stood there and looked around. And at like 3 a.m. with the school parking lot lights and went, oh crap. And the sad part was the fields at that school were terrible, and they were still terrible, of course, sadly. So,
to do a quick backtrack, you talking about the 07 show was such an inspiration for you for Phantom Regiment. That show gave me such a deeper affection for 4/3 rhythms that yeah, just so awesome. It just feels so good to the soul. And a guy that went to the same high school as me was a drum major that year, Darian Sanders. What's up, dude? So
yeah, to backtrack onto that, I actually had like a slight full circle moment when I was at UNT. The last year that I think they did the indoor, if you want to call it that, the marching festival at PASIC.
The like PASIC stuff. Yeah.
I was in that last UNT group in 08, and they played the drum solo from 07, and I was like so excited to get to play that. Like I was just, and and a lot of the dudes in that line were like some of the players that have been in those groups all the way back to like 03, and so like to get to play along with those, it was amazing. But yeah,
that's pretty sweet.
I had not made Phantom Regiment yet, and at that moment, that was the cleanest group by far I'd ever been in. And I just thought, like, wow, like I don't even have to try, and it sounds. I was playing like a steel pan, like yeah, okay, let me learn how to play on this. But yeah, really cool to get to play that.
That's a great feeling. And you did just kind of gloss over the fact that you were a part of a Fred Sanford award-winning ensemble in 2010, which I will not gloss over. And a good friend of Mike and mine who marched Rhythm X with us, Jared Quartz, who we did have on here, filled that bass spot. So one of my I guess, and this will tag on to like maybe some teaching tools and stuff that you picked up. But one of my most memorable moments from that show, for some reason, is the end of the quad break. They're just doing all this crazy sweep stuff, and the pit intro into the end of that just comes out of nowhere, and it's just this like crescendo, and you really hear it in the timpani. And I'm just like, for the front to time that coming out of this just kind of mixed meter hemiola quad break is pretty impeccable. And that's one of the most impressive things in that show, in my opinion. But yeah,
That,
Go ahead,
go
sorry.
for it. Yeah, I'll let you take it away.
I was just gonna say, I mean, that movement in particular was so much fun to play, and it just felt really good. It laid well in the hands. But it's funny you talk about that, because I'm recalling like how the things that we did to get that going, and it kind of ties back to what I was saying about like the whole group and the culture was like this understanding of like we had the single focus of making the music the best it could be. Like that was the goal. Like, yeah, we would love to like win drums, and yeah, we but the focus was always on like, no matter what, that's something that can't be taken away, which is like, we're going to play this music at the highest level possible. And there was a real understanding of the correlation between the front ensemble and the battery parts. And with that in particular, like, I think the phrase before that, there were a lot of these like isolated stabs that
Joom, joom,
So there would be many nights where on the bus, like I remember sitting with Matt Pinland and having him drum the quad and like trying to learn the quad feature so that I could understand how my part fit in with that. And the funny thing is, the timpanist that year was Tyler Salmons, and he was roommates with one of the quad players, like in real life, not drum corps life. And so I think if I can remember correctly, that lick that Tyler ended up playing on the timpani was kind of like in a rehearsal. Paul was like, Tyler, can you just like add the lick on the timpani? And and so, as pit folks, like it was our job to know their book, and I think he was able to put that in immediately because he already knew the book. And I think that's one of the clever things about being in those ensembles, and one of the things I've picked up and really try to utilize myself as a teacher is trying to give comments that force the student to find the answer versus just giving them the answer. You know what I mean? And meaning like, Paul does this very deliberate thing when we are adding in, like one of the things I think about when I think about like Vanguard and back in the day Phantom Regiment, or before that Crown, is the use of symbol textures and to accent and highlight things. And just like, I learned so much about like how to voice symbols from just listening to those recordings. But the way they get added in is super organic. It's not ever written in on our parts necessarily. It's added in as we go, and he has a specific way of doing it, saying like, okay, you know what, the peak of the battery solo, I want this symbol here, or like at the end of that triplet roll. He says it that way versus saying measure 43, add this in. And he's doing that so that you are forced to listen for the part and understand what they're playing. And that was one of those things that like as the time as a member, like it kind of creates this like, oh, okay, I got to get this right. But he's leading you to the answer without even saying the answer, and therefore you always nail it because you know exactly what you're playing with, versus like it would be so easy to be like, okay, letter A, just add this in. But by talking about what it was that you're playing with and not giving you that information, you're forced to listen so much more intently to get that. And
I love that, especially in an activity that by nature lends itself to a lot of rote teaching, just because of doing endless reps on reps on reps, finding ways to create more and more musicality and organic, just like circumstance that happens, because the shows aren't going to stay in time anyway. We try to, but they're not going to.
Wait, you mean drum corps aren't in time 100% at the tempo they want?
Well, yeah, they especially weren't back in the days when they didn't have long rangers. But
no, dude, back in the day, the push and pull of organic performances was insane.
But there's just like an energy about that.
Yeah, 100%.
I liked that aspect, and I had a professor. So I got my master's degree at Indiana University, and one of my primary professors was Kevin Bobo, and he actually marched like way back in the day on a snare line. I could not tell you the name of this drum corps. It was like Dutch Boy or one of those groups like that. That's probably not correct. Please don't quote me on that. But he's on the snare line, and I remember him saying like, if drum corps could figure out how to manipulate time together, that's like the next level. And I remember thinking like, well, I kind of think like maybe intentionally or unintentionally that does happen, but like live music moves. And like a case in point, look at that 2010 group. The end of the show, we had this huge ensemble, and because of the way we talk about listening and playing together and the emphasis on that, that allowed us to stretch that time together very organically and really, it's like, you know, like so right now I work in the university setting, and one of the things we talk about when talking about how to put your voice into the music you're making is to manipulate time. You can pull back and give weight to phrases to emphasize the arrival that's happening. And I think that by training, like, yes, you need a strong foundation of how to play these rhythms accurately and correctly and how to maintain time, but also being able to allow, maybe you want the end of a phrase to open up slightly, and then like put the energy on and have it moving forward. And knowing how to listen and move together like that is an invaluable skill that I totally attribute to my like time in drum corps. And that's something that as an ensemble player in the academic world, I would not replace for anything. And yeah.
Yeah, there was one year Phantom did too, or not Phantom, sorry. Vanguard played for their ballad like an arrangement of like adagio for strings, and they just like figured out how as a corps to pull it and bend it to where just like the field commander, drum major, whatever you comment or whatever, however you want to call it, they're just like hanging on it, and then all of a sudden it's just in, and that just creates such an emotion and effect. I mean, I think that anybody who's teaching somebody solo literature would dive into that so much. How are you going to separate yourself from someone else that's playing for an all-state audition or for a competition, a PASIC solo or an INE? What can you do to stand out, especially in a percussive aspect where time is really most of what we have, where we don't have as much tone like a clarinet or a trumpet would have, just using that weight to enact emotion.
Yeah, totally. And again, like I specifically think of that 2010 group. There was one show in particular in Mississippi. We had three shows in a row where
Mississippi. Ugh.
Yeah. But I remember it was 3 in a row leading into Atlanta, and I think the hype had been like, for us to set ourselves up for Atlanta, we really need to come out strong these 3 shows. And the first 2 nights we had won drums, and that third night was like one of those shows like I'll never forget, where we get to the end of the tune and we're playing, and it's like, you ever had one of those shows where you just feel like nothing could go wrong? Like it's like no matter.
Yep.
What. And so we're finishing it.
Yep.
And it was like way more exaggerated than we normally do it, but because we were all so in tune with where we were putting it, it was like pristine. And I'm telling you, it was like, you should go, like, if you have the free time, you could go find this somewhere probably. But it was so stretched out and so totally synced up. Like we left that building, like that was it. That was the one out of all the shows that summer. That one in particular, I bet if you asked anyone from that group, they would tell you about that show. And the funny thing is we lost drums that night, but I still
wow. I thought you were going the exact opposite direction with that story. I thought you was going to be like, everything was so perfect, and then until the very end, and we like botched the last note of the show or something. I think my brain went there because I have a secret story about botching the last note of a show, but
I don't think it's secret. You've said it on this.
Have I?
You've said
have
it on
I
this
told
podcast
the story
many times.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, yes, you have.
Have not.
Sure.
All right. Basically, quarterfinals night in 2012 at Blue Coats was the Battery's best run of the entire summer. It's better than semis, better than finals. It's quarters night was great, and the one Pipitone was the judge, and he was right in front of the snare line at the end of the show. You know, we're playing this thing to our eyeballs or whatever, and we had this like, was it a dotted quarter note rhythm at the end? Boom, whatever it was. Bottom line, it was perfect, and I just like overreached for the last note. And on the recording, Anye uploaded the quarters tape. You can hear it. It sounds like the recording screws up. It's that bad. It sounds like the recording skips. Like it's like almost a 30-second note after, like, or a 64th note, if you will, or whatever. It's bad. So I thought you were going the total opposite direction with that story, but it's just PTSD for me. So, you know, but before we move on, hold on, wait for it.
It's all Jeff Prosperi's fault, Lauren. It's his fault. Hattiesburg, Mississippi, July 28, 2010.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is.
All right, wait. I have to drink away my sorrows of telling that story again. There we go.
Yeah.
But in the opposite respect, how we're talking about just time moving and being pretty organic in this activity, I remember specifically having shows where we, as a battery, were just so sluggish because, say, the grass was like super thick.
Yeah.
And we're just moving at like halftime out there. We just can't have enough energy to play in the pit. It was like, you guys are really slow. I'm like, dude,
Get out there.
I'm
Look at the
sorry, but
grass.
you guys get out there and march. It sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one thing too that I do not envy about front ensemble and have total respect for, is just the understanding of the show at a much higher level than I ever did as a battery member. Because I'm just kind of like in there in the back. I'm trying to be a robot. I'm trying to play in time. I'm trying to watch the drum major's hands, this and that. And one day we're doing laundry in our center marimba. At the time, Alex Klutz was like, hey man, I want you to teach me the snare part. I want to learn it. And I was like, really? Why? And he was like, oh, just help me. I was like, okay, let's go. But never at any point did that cross my mind that, hey, why don't you teach me that 2-mallet lick you guys got in the beginning of part 5 or something? I'm just like, nope.
I don't need
So
that. Well,
the level of understanding that you guys as front ensemble members integrated in the show have is definitely higher.
I think it's to make up for all the lack of marching, maybe. It's just like add the responsibility that way.
Yep, extra mental demand.
Yeah. So, yeah, so again, the drum corps thing had a huge impact on me as a player. And I think ultimately what I'm doing now, when I finished UNT, I kind of took 2 years off. I did what I think a lot of folks do, get a music degree, which is I did the percussion director thing in Georgia. I had family out there, and I remember I actually submitting my resume to my aunt who worked in Cobb County, and she said, "Oh, I'll send this to like our music coordinator, who happened to be Gary Markham, who was like at the time was the chief judge of DCI, and he saw the groups I'd been in, and he was like, oh, I've got got an opening for you. I see the drum corps, and that's kind of how I ended up out that way." And I think that time was really important for me to kind of hone in on what it is I really wanted to do with my career, or at least at that time. And as someone that teaches now, I really advocate for students, if you go the music route in school, to like, don't go straight through degrees, but take time between your degrees so you can really, if you do go get a master's, you get at least an idea of like, why are you going to get it and what is it that you're trying to get out of it? Because I think 2 years for a typical master's degree flies by, and it's impossible to get everything out of a program in that time. And I was super appreciative of everything I learned, and realized I was maybe needing to learn being a percussion director for those 2 years. And it kind of solidified my thoughts that I needed to go to a program that maybe had some hand drumming and drum set, but also would allow me to continue playing marimba, because those were the gigs that I was getting called to do. And, for my 4 years of drum set at UNT, I'm definitely not a drum set player, and felt like I needed to expand upon that. So that's how I ended up in Indiana. And, I guess I'm skipping a part that was a pretty big break for me, which was when I moved to Georgia. I remember going to like a BOA show, I think in Alabama, taking like the Georgia crew over the border and watching it and really thinking like, man, I miss doing drum corps, and I miss getting to see this. And I think it was like 2012, Vanguard was playing. That was like their Starry Night show, and I got to go watch them rehearse. And I just like really realized how much I did miss the activity, and like it would be nice to get involved. And it wasn't 2 weeks later that I actually got a phone call from Chris Romanowski that I thought was funny. I had met him a few weeks before. When I moved out to that area, I didn't know anyone really, and so I was just trying to like figure out who were the percussionists, what was the scene like. And someone had said, well, why don't you go check out Atlanta CD, come with me. And I come up and meet Chris Romanowski, and he walks up and goes, "Hi, Chris Romanowski, inventor of the heavy hitter pad." And I was like, hello, nice to meet you.
Co-inventor.
Co-inventor, Bill Bachman.
As Bill Bachman would argue.
Yeah, well, I think Chris would also say.
Of course,
yeah. So, but it was a lucky, like I think it was just kind of a random, like me coming to check out a rehearsal. I think a horn guy that I'm trying to remember exactly how this happened. Anyways, he brought me out, and so Chris called me a few weeks later and was like, "Hey, you want to come teach Atlanta CV?" And I'm thinking, yeah, absolutely. Like I'm daydreaming. So to get in a DCA, I thought was great. And it wasn't like 2-3 weeks after that, I actually got a call from Paul Rennick asking if I was interested in teaching at the Troopers. And little did I know how that was going to affect the next 8 or 9 years of my life. But of course I said, absolutely, I want to do that. And he was really trying to create a scenario for his students to teach. There are limited jobs out there in the DCI world. And I think that was a really cool thing. And I was very appreciative of being considered to do that. So that's kind of how I got the Troopers thing. And then, I eventually made the decision that I wanted to go to grad school and IU, and I picked IU because of a guy I actually met at Troopers who worked at Center Grove. Jason Hammondwood was a bass tech at Troopers, and kept talking to me. He's like, we're looking for a pit tech, like for the pit tech jobs coming open. You want to come work at Center Grove? And I had at that time had no interaction with indoor. I think I taught like a Scholastic A group kind of on the side, very casually, and I didn't really fully understand what it was or what that scene was. And that seemed exciting to me. I knew the guy, Josh Torres, that was running it, was a UNT alumni. And so that seemed like an interesting avenue for me. And so I applied to IU and kind of all fell into place. And I got to end up working at Center Grove, which that was an amazing experience. I learned a lot about what to do, what not to do. And one of the best parts was really working with folks that kind of had different backgrounds than my own and seeing like what they do and utilize. And I think that was a little bit of a humbling experience, but also like a huge learning experience for me. In particular, just like being a little more thoughtful about when we are working on just the mechanics and skill sets, like how to develop those exercises to make the book come together a little bit quicker. Because a lot of like I think I was lucky in the sense that the groups I came from, it was a lot of talk about like the music and how we're trying to make that sound, but it wasn't so much on just developing the mechanics from what I can remember. And now, that's not a fair blanket statement, but getting to Center Grove and really seeing like the correlation between like taking the time to dive into the technique side of things and then the chop side of things and seeing how those can marry together can really make some amazing results with the kids. And like I just remember being blown away by the things we were able to do with that high school group. Like, at the time I was just like, this feels like a miniature drum corps to me. Like but
yeah, that's not a bad program to be thrust into as well. I mean, especially obviously you were probably exposed to many significantly good high school programs coming from Texas, but then the Indiana area is also pretty well saturated, especially that Indianapolis area itself and like the suburbs around it. And definitely more into the WGI indoor scene than the Texas bands are.
Sure.
And then also happens to be a great music school there too. What do you know?
Works out that way. Yeah.
Any good school of music, no big deal. Ended up getting your master's there, no big deal. So
really good experience. Like I said, it seems like it went by in a flash. Like I blinked and I was already done with it. And I was lucky enough, like after those 2 years, I had been kind of thinking I would stick around in Indiana. I'll be honest, it was freezing. I'm a Texas girl, and I remember walking outside and it was like -5 degrees. And I was like, nope, we're gonna go back inside. Actually, I remember very distinctly one rehearsal for like just marching band. It started snowing, and to me, it looked like a blizzard. And the band director's like, okay, go ahead and blah, 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 reset. And there's like girls in like spaghetti strap shirts and like, like the guard. And I'm just like, what? Cancel school. Like, what's happening? Like, there's. I'm like, I looked at the pit and I was like, my hands are ice cold. So I don't know what to tell you. Like,
I'm sure you could play this better if you were warmer.
Yeah. Crazy triple laterals and like stuff. And I'm just like, good luck. I can't feel my hands. So that was an eye-opening culture shock a little bit. Yeah, but I loved working there before. Again, Josh Torres is just an amazing educator, and he truly gets those kids to experience it all, like not just the WGI group, which I think they do a great job of, but like the solo lit and the percussion ensemble, like those kids can seriously, like I remember, I think it was like the 2016 group, they really started doing like the hand-to-hand stuff. And that snare girl was a killer marimba player. Like she was not just like a throw down on snare drum, but she can also play marimba just as well. It's just like, and that was how all those kids were. I think the first time I had a student that I was like, oh, that kid can outplay me. Like it was like, what I mean? Like you he showed me something. I was like, oh, okay. Like normally I can just like walk up and do it. And I was like, oh, okay, let me hack that out. Like, yeah.
That's how I feel with currently teaching like a world-class indoor drumline. I'm like, I gotta make sure I'm ready to go. These kids are gonna make me look bad. So the literature that kids play now versus like when I marched,
it's
I'm
light
like,
years ahead.
I'm like, all right, this is like I got a silver medal. Like I guess you would silver medal. The corps finished second, and we finished second drums. It was a good drum line, but like some of the stuff I see these kids playing on like Instagram and stuff like that, I'm like, bro, what?
I don't even know what half of it is. And I've always had a pretty good vocabulary in terms of rudiments. I don't know what's going on. All right, good for you.
I feel that way looking at like the Troopers book. I'm like, man, they like half this many notes when we won drums, and it's like 10 years. Like it's not even that long. You know what I mean? It's just like crazy to see how much it's grown.
The evolution.
Is oh yeah, way to go, Jinx. But yeah, the evolution is crazy, and that level of like player.
Yeah.
I don't want to say at bottom end because that sounds like condescending, but I think everybody knows what I mean. At the lower finishing, somebody's got to finish lower. It just is what it is. But those talent levels at like the lower finishing cores is like getting so much higher that everything is just like getting boosted from the bottom up. It's crazy.
It's like, and I mean, talking about Troopers, like in 2013, that was the closest we made to finals. But the groups now that we have would play circles around that group, and it's just that everyone's gotten so much better. You know, it's unbelievable. Like some of the kids, like I've got on the Merlin line now, it's just like, yeah, okay, cool, play Merlin, that's awesome. Like
great. So you talking about you getting the call to go teach at Troopers for 2013? Obviously, Paul, networking, knowing people is a huge part of the thing. Like obviously, just getting your foot in the door, it certainly helps. Yes. But at the same time, as an individual, you had to be ready. Like you had to, I forget, there's some like terminology in sports, like for the guy who's like riding the bench, just like when your name gets called, you just gotta be ready to go. And you can't get in there and not produce, and you just gotta be ready for it when it comes. So just being ready, and like everything you've done to this point obviously has led you to put yourself in a position to be ready, to be like, I got the call, I'm ready to go, I'm about to kill this. So when you stepped into Troopers in 2013, what was your original role with the group?
My original role was the front ensemble coordinator, I think was the official title. And then in 2014, we had opening, I will say, immediately for the caption head position. And that year, me and a guy that I went to school with, Chris McWilliams, kind of held the fort together and were co-caption heads. And then in 15, I just kind of took it over. And, you know, I'll be honest, I've learned a ton, and I certainly would not say that I felt ready to take that on, but I've been fortunate to make a lot of very, what's the word to say, friends that were willing to help me and share their knowledge and answer the phone if should I call frantically and saying like, okay, how would you do this? And I think that's the biggest thing is I wasn't afraid to call and talk to some, like know that I have friends that had experienced these things and hear them out and realize where my
not being prideful is great.
It's worked so far, I think, and on top of that, just surrounding myself with a team that is really strong. You know, I think the team at Troopers is I can't say enough great things about, and I learn things from everyone on that staff every year, and it's truly maybe more so than a lot of groups. It's a group effort from all of us to get that group to do what they do. Yeah, it definitely was you know, I think. Ultimately, the conversation went, it was actually Sandy Rennick that really inspired me to take that next step. When the position was open, I was kind of just as de facto keeping it running in 14. And she said, well, why couldn't you be the caption head? Because, you know, traditionally when you think of a caption head, you kind of think it's typically a battery centric person. And she said, well, why couldn't it be a front ensemble person? Like who's to say that it can't be that way? And, you know, I think that was an eye-opening conversation. And she said, if you want it, you need to say something. Don't wait. And that was also a powerful moment for me. And I kind of apply that now to a lot of other situations in my life where it's like, sometimes you're not going to feel ready or you're not going to feel like you have all the answers, but putting yourself out there, you're either going to fail and learn a lot from it, or you're going to succeed. And either way, you're going to grow from that experience. So I think it's important too to let folks know like what you are willing to do and what you want to do. Like you know, like to tie it back to the IU thing, I remember having a conversation with our brass arranger after one rehearsal at Troopers, Robert W. Smith, and I was like, what are you trying to do? Like why are you getting a master's degree? And I said, well, ultimately I think I want to teach college. And that one conversation I think is what really opened the doors for me to start being a college teacher. I remember I was driving to move-ins the next year. I was graduating at IU, and I was thinking at the time I was going to stick around at Center Grove. I was going to work with Jeff Queen over at Carmel, and I was just going to do the pit tech thing. And I get a phone call from Robert W. Smith and he was like, you ever thought about living in Alabama? And I was like, well, no. but I'm listening. And he goes, well, there's an opening in Alabama for a position down there. And if you're interested, like, I'm going to put your name forward. And I was lucky to meet Tracy Wiggins, and we had one conversation about philosophy of teaching and how we think about sound, and that kind of sealed the deal. So I just think it's important to put things out there. Like, if you're interested in doing something or want to do that, say it, and don't be like hiding it. Like, no one's going to think of you if you don't tell people you're interested in doing that. And secondly, be ready, have experiences. That's something I tell my students all the time. It's just like, you need to have, your undergrad especially is your time to have different experiences. So when the phone rings and someone says, hey, can you play this conga part? You can say, yeah, I've had the experience. Because the music field in general is not a predictable path. And so it's all about having as many experiences as possible to prepare you for when one door opens, you can walk through it.
I think that's beautifully put. And also, I think that those work in tandem. You're talking about not being afraid to go for it and having experiences, which you're not going to get the experiences if you're not afraid to go for it. I mean, at the end of the day, what's the worst that could happen? I have been cut from way more ensembles than I ever made.
Yep.
So
any successful person will literally just tell you, how do you get to where you want to go? Literally just start doing it. Start doing it. Like you said, verbalizing that you want to do it to whoever you want. Like, just start. Like, you might not be great at it at first, but greatness takes time and effort. Nobody is born great at anything. No matter how naturally talented somebody is, you don't come out of the womb just amazing at something. Just start doing it, and you'll learn as you go. I mean...
Well, I think I did come out of the womb amazing.
Yeah, you were ready to go.
Yeah, okay. We talked about that. Fair point.
To kind of double back to what Sandy was telling you, like, well, why not a more front ensemble focused person? I think that doubles back to what you were saying earlier and what we were kind of talking about, your understanding of the full package of the show, not just the battery, but of the horn line too, as far as like understanding that. Because, if I was sitting on top of a box or a tower and I was lining things up, which I do a lot, my instructions to the battery are probably going to be a lot more detailed than they would be to the front ensemble. It's like, oh yeah, so like battery, when we get to this like triplet roll that ends on like count 3 and like this third phrase, and then the front ensemble, it's like, because my nuance is not as high in the front ensemble because I haven't experienced that, I'm not going to be able to give them as much as a detailed answer. So it lends you to a much more full package, like
viewpoint,
feedback.
Feedback
that you could give to the members.
That's
so like, why not?
That's interesting to me. I'd never actually thought about. You're right, Lauren. That like a lot more caption heads are battery focused people. Obviously, I'm sure Tom knows a lot about front ensembles. Tom Ungst or Tom Rarick has written front books for a long time, etc. But you are right. Like a lot of them were in batteries when they marched, and that's a good point. That to piggyback off what Evan just said, that you would like. I can't give comments to the front beyond timing stuff. But I'm a drumhead. But this is an example. Like,
Mike sucks.
Hey, shut up. All right, listen. But it would just make more sense from an understanding of the whole package, because it's for an ensemble member. You have to understand the whole package.
Well, I think one thing that I'll point out, which is another influence that as I've gotten older, I definitely recognize too. But like Julie Davila in the 90s was in Phantom Regiment front ensemble. I had no idea until recently she was a front person just based on her tapes and the amount of detail she's allowed and the things she picks up from an ensemble standpoint. Like, she's got such a perception as far as like ensemble what's happening. And that's something I always value from her tapes. And I just think that like my comments typically to front or battery end up kind of being in the same categories. We're talking about the musicality of it, we're talking about the timing of it, and we're talking about the sound quality of it. I'm not going to pretend to say that I'm going to get in there and tell them like, all right, you need to feel the pressure here at the end of this roll to get the next. I have texts that are going to do that. But what I am going to talk about is like how it feels, what you need to be thinking about, the sound quality of it. And those are universal things. That's music things, and I think that can apply to the horn line too.
For sure.
Like the concept that like, what are we trying to say musically? If we can all think that the same way, more or less, it's probably going to result in the sound we're looking for. Just don't ask me to talk about marching.
Wait, say that again. You cut out.
Don't ask me to talk about marching though, because straight leg. I don't really.
Your tondue's jacked. Um, well, I think this segues great too. You were just previously talking about your gig that you got. I don't want to call it a gig, but the role that you got in Alabama. Was that at UAB? Was that at University? I know you had a few different schools down there.
So the first one I landed with was University of North Alabama, where Dr. Wiggins is the percussion coordinator of that area. And that was, like, I am so thankful to get that first experience. I think I learned a lot in that first semester about just from like logistics and organizational skills. These were things I was kind of learning at Troopers, but it was another level at that university, and just making sure like I was giving the students what they need and being clear about that. And so there was that gig, and then Gene Famber at UAB was actually in sabbatical that year, so he hired myself and Sean Womack, who at the time was the caption at the Mandarins, to come in and be like the interim adjuncts, which was awesome. We had Monday drum day every week, and that's where I got to learn how funny Sean was. So that was my first year there, and then I was also lucky actually to work with Brad Palmer, his company Double Stop at the same time, which operates out of Birmingham. And I think that the model that he and Sean Womack had come up with, where they basically are contractors that go into different schools and provide percussion classes, so you can basically exclusively teach percussion but make a full-time living if you want to put the hours in, was really cool, and something that down the road I was, not trying to do in Hawaii. And then from there, I got a phone call I was in the middle of teaching a camp. I spent 2 years at UNA, and I was in the middle of teaching their marching band camp going on to my third year. And I got a phone call that said, what are your goals career-wise? And at the time, like, I was, kind of doing it right now. I want to do a little bit of everything that allows me to have flexibility, but still in the academic world. And this person was kind of vague, and they were just like, well, get your resume ready. And they hung up. And it was like this, like, very, like, call. I was like, okay. And then the next day, my phone was like blowing up with all these different people I'd worked with, like from Troopers and just knew from Alabama that the University of Alabama folks were actually looking at me to be the interim director of percussion for the year, because their director, Tim Feeney, had just taken a job in California like mid-June.
Roll Tide.
Oh yeah, Roll Tide. And that was such a crazy whirlwind of an experience. That was not something that I saw myself doing at that time. And again, it was one of those moments of like, this is something that I don't necessarily feel ready for, but I'm going to either succeed or I'm going to learn a lot trying. And I certainly did learn a lot about that whole experience. And on top of that, yes, I went to UNT, which our football was dismal. So to get to go to a school where the football literally crushes everyone except for Clemson, which they did not win that year, was pretty...
Oh, no.
Like, oh my gosh, like just getting, like, and that was the whole thing. I like, when I got hired, I was like, I'd be happy to work with the marching band. Like, that's what I do. And getting to go and see how they travel, it was like, literally we had police escorts everywhere. I remember we drove down to Miami. Never did we stop at a stoplight. They would like block the highway off. So it was just like, it was
presidential escort. That's what's up.
Yeah, it was like unbelievable. And I remember the last game, it was we played Clemson out in California, Santa Clara, which was a very funny, like, oh, we're out here. They chartered like this plane, but the weird thing was the plane, I can't even remember the name of the plane brand or whatever, but it was not one I recognized. And we walked on and it looked like it was straight out of the 70s, like with like the cigarette. I was like, is this plane gonna take, like, I did not think it would take off. I was a little skeptical.
Duct tape wings.
Yeah, I looked it up and it was like, oh, this company went out of business because a plane like crashed into the mountains. And I was like,
sweet.
So it was cool getting to like we literally drove onto the tarmac in the bus and got straight off and got a little bag of Chick-fil-A and got straight onto the plane. That was cool. But then it was like,
are we going to make it?
Are we going to take off? Are we going to be fine? Great. And it was really cool to see just like what that life was about. And again, I've learned an incredible about what that would take to run a studio. And yeah, and then from there, like at the end of the year, I kind of took the job knowing that like there was a real possibility that would be a 1-year gig. And I kind of had this opportunity where just kind of on a whim, I was kind of half joking, half not. I texted a friend of mine that I had met at the Troopers, Todd Clevenger, who used to be our visual caption head. And I was like, what do you think? You think I could just move to Hawaii and teach drums out there? And at the time, I had been writing for a school, Mililani, for the past 3 years. They go to BOA every 2 years, and it's like a really surprising band, just like the way they go about things and how organic the process of putting the show is totally different. Like the first year I was with them was in 2017. And I remember going out and meeting the kids, and their listening skills were like pretty remarkable, and they had no percussion teacher. Like they were just self-taught. And I remember thinking, what's going on here? And I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and they were like, well, think about it. They don't have, it's not like Texas where there's a tech for every left pinky. They have to figure it out on their own and want it that much more. And sometimes it's less is more in that sense. Like if we don't give a student every answer and they have to figure it out, it's actually like a much more impactful lesson for them. So their years were really great. And just like the passion that every single one of those kids and the like pride they had in what they were doing was like I still get goosebumps watching that show they put on. And they went to BOA that year in 17. And it was the first year a school from Hawaii made it to semifinals, and they were the last band called out for semifinals. And I remember like everyone just like, I was in like a group that, and it was just like blowing up because they literally called out like all 50, however many groups, I think it was 50, and Mililani was
a lot.
there.
I remember that. Wasn't there 2 groups from Hawaii that went that year?
A group from Maui also went that year. But yeah, it's pretty incredible, the band scene out there. So anyways, I'd been working with this group, and I texted the guy that was drill, and I was just kind of half joking, and he was like, actually, funny you say that. We just had a conversation about like trying to create a full-time job for a percussion director, and how that happened. And next thing I knew, I put my things in storage in Alabama and got on a plane with 2 suitcases and got to live in Hawaii, which was amazing.
That sounds terrible.
I know. It was, man, like the weather was perfect every day. There was when we rehearsed, we had to look at these beautiful mountains with like
terrible experience.
So awful, man.
So I found this through whatever you want to call it, Facebook creeping or investigative research, whichever way you want to look at it.
We'll go with the latter.
Yeah.
You're a instructed or certified scuba diver. Were you that before you went to Hawaii or after you went to Hawaii?
I was. I'm sure this is annoying to people that actually know me, but I have this like secret obsession. I guess not really a secret, but I'm like obsessed with the ocean and whales. And in another life, I probably would have been a marine biologist. But I felt getting to live in Hawaii and teach percussion and have a group of friends that were percussionists, but also get to go like free diving with dolphins every week was just like, I felt like I was a little bit in a dream. I'm not gonna lie.
That's mind blowing to someone that grew up in Kentucky.
All right, we're done rehearsing. Let's go swim with the dolphins.
So I'm teaching those kids right now over Zoom, and I joke all the time. I'm like, man, sure, go look for whales for me. I'm in Texas, not there. But yeah, it was pretty incredible. But the scuba diving thing actually happened, I think, when I was living in Georgia. But yeah.
Fun fact.
Yeah, that just sounds like a dream. We're going to go teach percussion in Hawaii, and it's going to be 70 degrees every day. And yeah, my life's awesome. So
I could just brag for a second. No, yeah, honestly, I had no plans to leave, and I had plans over spring break to come here for a troopers camp, and then I was going to judge an indoor show, I think in Kentucky. So I was.
What do you know?
Was it for MCGC with Mike Leitsky in that circuit?
It might. I can't remember, to be honest. I'd have to go back and dig it up. Anyways, it got canceled because there was this mysterious illness, but I still got on the flight because I had to judge this contest, and I got on the plane. And things were one way. And I just had a meeting because we were taking the Mililani group to WGI last year. That was the plan. Like that was going to be the first year that the kids were going to compete. And I remember we had a meeting with the admin, and they're like, this is all good. We're still going to go. It's fine. Got on the plane, got off the plane in Texas. And it was like the world had shut down. This was March 13th. And it was like, oh. And so I was going to go see my parents for 4 days before the indoor show. And so I just ended up like hanging out with mom and dad for months, which was awesome. It's probably the most I've seen my parents since I was in high school. So I think that was like a very valuable period of time. But during that time, I remember talking to the principal of the high school, and he was like, don't worry about coming back the rest of the semester. We're staying virtual. And they have in fact been virtual this entire time, and they still have not gone back in person. So I still teach Mililani at night. It's 8 p.m. my time when I start their rehearsal, which is 4 p.m. their time. So that's been as everyone I'm sure is experiencing, it's been interesting to learn how to make that productive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Mike and I are certainly not in any Hawaii situation in Kentucky, but outside of the ice rain that we're currently experiencing, I do recommend a trip to Kentucky for anyone because there's beautiful hiking, rolling hills with horses, and plentiful bourbon that is around. So there's all that. I guess the next topic I would pick your brain about kind of dives back to, you said you got your job in Alabama. You were talking about your philosophies of sound and this and that. And obviously you spent a wealth of time developing yourself, not only as a marching percussionist, but just as a marimba soloist, like a music literature, whatever you want to call it, concert percussionist. You were principal percussion for a few different ensembles. I saw one in Alabama and then a few others. So what was it about your philosophy that sold it to her? Like, take us through that. Are you a feel over a sound over a feel type of person? Are you this, what is it?
I definitely am, and maybe to a fault at sometimes, but my perception of my own training, and for correctness or not, is that it was always about the sound. And so what I can remember, like, I have this like distinct perception that I never had a true marimba lesson until I studied with Kevin Bobo. That was the first time I really received like a technical comment that made me think about the way I was moving. And I'm not saying like that is the right or wrong way. It's just like that was my experience. It was always about the sound we were trying to make. And for me, I think that is the direct way to the path. I think both ways work. You can talk about how it should feel and it will result in a sound. But the thing that I think bothers me is when you talk about the feel and sometimes forget to want it to feel that way is because it won't sound. And ultimately, people developed a technique because they knew it created that sound. And so I'm a big proponent of like talking about the sound you want and letting your hands adjust to make the sound versus thinking about how it should feel. And then whatever sound results is just like an after effect of that, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. I think that ensembles in the modern era of marching percussion are starting to trend more in that direction. Yeah. Especially if you compare now 2020, 2021 to like 1990, yeah. There's kind of been I don't want to say an all out abandonment, but a less strict height system.
Yeah.
That I think is a wonderful evolution of the activity that has just allowed for a more balanced ensemble across the board. When right. Not just talking about snares, not just talking about quads, but you're talking about percussion ensemble, horn ensemble, like full package, strictly speaking, in like a marching band activity. Just because you're allowing people to use their ears more and thinking less about geometry.
Well, that's the whole thing. You know, I'm not saying the height system is right or wrong. I'm just saying that, like, for me, forte in one context is not the same in another, and I think it limits you to a specific. And it's like you said, like I will make the example to students that like I can play 12 inches and have two completely different sounds. And if you're totally relying on just how it feels, there's never a right or a wrong. And so I tell my students that all the time. Like, there's not a right or wrong sound. It's just, are we matching? Are we playing the same sound? Because sometimes you're going to need like a heavier sound or maybe a more articulate sound, and sometimes you want a lighter sound, or maybe you want like a thinner sound for like a really soft moment. It just depends on the context. And so again, I think that it's just a more direct route to understanding by talking about the sound. And so and that's not to say like that I won't talk about like how it moves and stuff. Like, there's definitely times where that needs to come into play, but I'm just like wary of getting too into, okay, think about it rotating more here versus like we're trying to put more of an accent on this note or whatnot like that.
Well, you not only have the musical context, you have the anatomical differences between each person. Like, people's hands are different sizes, your arms are different sizes and weights, and what gets the forte sound you want in one context for one person might be a little different for the person standing next to them. And at the end of the day, what matters, you know, you're judging a marching show or whatever, or any ensemble, you're not right up in front of them. You're not really going to notice if this snare drummer or this marimba player is playing a little bit higher or using a slightly different technique, as long as the sound blends and it all sounds the way you want it to sound. So that evolution, just piggyback off what you guys have been talking about, has been incredible, I think, because that way you avoid snare drummers that have their drum up to their nipple. Like,
right, trying to match the heights.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. Although I would argue some judges use it as a scapegoat to slot groups.
Maybe.
There's that.
I'm like, I could go on and on about that because I'll be honest, like obviously we get our trooper tapes, but maybe I have friends at other drum corps that are placing, first, second, and I'm also able to hear their tapes. And the type of commentary that's happening is so interesting to me about how it's so much more focused on like fundamental, like just how they're moving and whatnot versus like, it's just different. And I can't tell you how like disappointed I am when I hear like, yeah, marimba 3 is just not rotating the same. I'm like, can you please talk about the sound? Are you saying that it's not blending? And I really wish to see the judging community as a whole. I'm not saying all of them, but I wish there was more of a focus on, again, the result we're looking for versus like the means to get the result. Meaning like they're talking about the technique because what I'm assuming is they're saying it's not blended. But rather than talking about the technique not looking the same, please talk about the sound is not the same, if that's what you mean. And that is something that I would love to see happen over the next few years. Like as the teaching side of things becomes more focused on that, I would hope that that's reflected in the judge. And I 100% will tell you that the amount of times I get comments just about like the technique, and maybe this makes me sound full of myself a little bit, but it's like I teach 4 mallets to college students, you know what I mean? And like,
no, I'm 100% on board. I, over the years, have developed a lot of relationships in the activity with people who are fortunate enough to get gigs and caption head jobs with many different groups. So I've kind of gobbled up a black market of drum tapes, as you will, that I keep in a Dropbox folder. And I think it's funny the nuance that's given to some groups versus the nitpicking that's given to other groups. A friend of mine he was a caption head at a group striving to make finals for a few years, getting their balls busted for like some tap 5s that sounded pretty good, but they're just like nitpicking this and that. And then you listen to another group who's competing for a gold medal that you're like, man, they're really like giving those comments with a grain of salt right now. So
yeah,
I think judging transparency needs to be boosted significantly.
I would love to see tapes release, which and I say that
they used to put them on the DVDs.
I know I get it. Judging is it's a thankless job, right? Like that's such pressure to get it right. And
I don't envy it at all.
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter which side you're on. You're going to get attacked. But like at the same time, like I think just by releasing the tapes, it would be a much more transparent situation. And again, I would love to see the level of comments not be based on the core's ranking. And maybe I'm just assuming it's that way, but there are tapes on YouTube too. That like you can hear, and it's like so frustrating to me to hear a group maybe challenge on some just like notes, like straight up like the notes are not the same. Yeah, we're getting comments about like, they didn't rotate the same.
I mean, I think that there are levels of it that obviously I just said I don't envy it, but I do think that the activity, in order to push forward like the level of training for the judges, has to amplify too. And I think that I know a lot of judges that would agree with that, just because they have to keep up with the evolution of the activity. I mean, we're over here talking about groups playing stuff now that are finishing in like 14th, 15th place that like I didn't play as a second place finisher. When Mike and I went to DCI finals a couple years ago, I think scouts were in 15th place, and I'm sitting there watching them. I was like, is a 15th place drumline? Like, what is going on?
Our minds were blown.
And just with the addition of like electronics and like the level of like layering and the arrangements and the addition of like body and the environmental demand, like, is this group doing something that's hard? Like, do judges from 50 years ago know that it's hard, or do they know the difference between somebody who's just simply doing a plie or the Blue Devils who are moonwalking while they're playing a snare break? Like,
no,
so,
I think there's judges like Mike Likesky who have like really taken the steps to educate themselves as much as they can on what is happening and be able to speak thoroughly about every aspect of it. And then there are other judges that, like, it's just not in their wheelhouse, and it's not their fault necessarily, but it's the lack of money. Like, there's not money to provide those things, like, from my impression at least. Versus like
certainly not right now.
Yeah, definitely not right now. But yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, there would be, yearly training, and, I think in an ideal world, in my opinion, there would be more percussion judges, and that's coming from percussionists. But I would love to see there be more detailed, maybe like a percussion ensemble on. Go back to the PE1, PE2, but
I think that would be incredible. I'm 100% in support of that.
Yeah,
Box judge, field judge, everybody wins.
Yeah,
dude. Even if they wanted to keep it somewhat similar to what it is, like P1 has like limits on what they can access to the field, which I don't agree with, but whatever. If they want to keep that, fine. But like P2 should sit. Let's edit that out. Should sit about like 10 rows back and just watch the front ensemble the whole time. I mean, you're going to be able to hear the whole ensemble.
Yeah. I think for better or worse, I found with the first year of the new limits on where they could go in the field, we definitely got way more comments about the front ensemble than any other year. So, I mean, in that sense, that was a positive thing, but I don't want it to be, you have to pick one or the other. I just wish there was a way. I mean, there is a way just
to evaluate all of it.
All of it. Yeah. Exactly.
Obviously it's a money game, but I understand. Yeah.
My vote, let's take the music 2 or whatever it was this last year and let's just move it back to PE2.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm on board.
Excited.
DCI, we know you're listening. Make it happen.
They're not listening.
I know.
Maybe. We'll see. I'm not going to be that vain, but we'll see. I guess too, one of the last things here, you have been able to experience a couple of unique performance opportunities that I thought were rather intriguing. One, internationally, and two, on the state of Hollywood. So take us through that. You were on the Hunger Games for 2000, Catching Fire, right?
Yeah, I got to do the 4th one too, but you can't actually see me in that one, so I don't think it counts. You can see my behind. But actually, when I moved to Atlanta in 2012, a friend of mine that I marched with, Nick Taylor,
Naylor,
yeah,
who rides
good old Nick.
Way more bicycle than I'll ever ride.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that guy, and just his snare drum playing is unbelievable. But his now wife had just moved from Atlanta, and she was on the Falcons drumline. She was, I think, base 1. And so I can't remember how me and Nick started talking about it, but he was like, hey, if you're in the area now, you should check out Falcons. It's a good way to meet people in the area. And I was like, oh, that sounds fun. So I went out and tried out for the bass line. That was the most drill I've ever done in my entire marching career, which I think is so fun. How much things I do with the marching world. I don't actually march drill. But yeah, so I had drill. But that was like a really good experience. And there was actually a lot of OG blasters in there that had a lot of performance experience. And one of the guys that coordinated the Falcons drumline thing was, oh my gosh, what's his face? Chris Moore, who's now, I think he's acting as the core director at Spirit right now. But he works at Georgia Tech on that campus. And I don't know if this is well known, but Atlanta has kind of become a little bit of a Hollywood because of the tax breaks. So they actually film a lot Walking Dead and Vampire Diaries and stuff like that. They film in Atlanta, and so they were filming Hunger Games out there. And they had filmed this one scene on Georgia Tech's campus. And I guess while they were doing that, it had come up somehow that they needed 30 drummers. And so Chris Moore got involved with that and he sent out an email to the Falcons drumline and said, hey, you guys want to be in a movie? Yeah. For sure.
Heck yeah.
For sure. And so, it's all the Falcons drumline. We get to go and we get the fitting, and it's so secretive. Oh my gosh, no phones, any of that. It was very intense. And then the level of detail, that was the thing that I remember just being so blown away by. There were maybe 500 extras in there getting their hair and their makeup and uniforms, and they lined all of us up and went down the row, and they redid my hairstyle 10 times. And mind you, I'm in the movie for maybe 0.05 seconds. It's blinking and miss it. It's not a lot of time, but they spent so much time making sure each and every one of us looked exactly the way they wanted us to. Still blows my mind. And so then we get out there, and it's on the outside of the Atlanta Motor Speedway or something, and they have this giant green screen, and they have 50 32-inch timpani just baking in the sun, and I just remember it being so hot, and they all hand us these like mixed match like concert bass drum mallets, like here you go, and they and they're like okay, and they played this like composed track, and they're like all right, you guys got it right, and we were like no, and I
get that one more time.
I was like, wait, is there like sheet music or something? And so like Dave Cox, who was an alumni of Blast, you know, and UNT and all that, I think he stepped up and was like, all right. And he like came up with a little like ditty we could like loop over and over again. And so we were like, okay, we'll just do that. And then the funniest part was like there were like two random like career extras that come, like they just seem like they just get in on like all the extra gigs and whatnot. And they're like over in the corner practicing, like they're like ba-da-dum. I'm like very like focused on like it's got to be just right, and the rest of us are like, oh yeah, it's fine, like it'll be good.
Whatever.
And 2, 3, and 4, like something like that. And so we line up and we're standing there, and the funniest part also I remember them being like, okay, set, and most of us having marching backgrounds were like, okay, we get still, and we're hanging out, and it's like 20 minutes would go by, and we're like look around like are we, what are we doing? And then they'd be like, rolling. And another 10 minutes would go by, and they'd be like, action! And then immediately it would just start happening. It was just like, whoa, okay. So quite a bit different. Things move a little bit slower. And then I remember
where's the 8 counts from the Met? What's going on?
Okay, you're called set. We're ready. No, 20 minutes later. But so then the scene we're in is the like parade scene, I guess, when like they bring, I don't know if you've seen the movie, when they bring the tributes out and they're all in like these horse carriages. So they start playing the music over the loudspeakers, and the horses start coming out, and they're like, play really loud. So we're like, okay. And the horses like totally freak out. Like we start playing because they don't like the sound of the timpani, so they like shut it down. The horses are losing their minds, and they're like, okay, we need you to make it look like it's really loud, but you can't play. It's like, okay,
ghost strokes. Here it is.
Yeah. It was totally ghosting it, and it you know. And I remember me and a buddy, we were like, okay, we're gonna be the money shot. We're gonna do it. And sure enough, the camera came like right by us, and like afterwards we're like, yeah. And we made the trailer, which was like, I'm sure I'll never top this. And I will tell you, I totally use this anytime I get a new job, like at a high school. I start with like, you guys, I was in the Hunger Games, so you have to think I'm cool because
yeah, you have to respect me and listen to me. You know, it's just a big deal.
Yeah, like do what I say, and you'll be in a movie too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I'll tell you, you know, like I went to go see the movie in the theaters, and I was so into the movie, forgot that I was in it, and then the scene came up. And it was like, oh yeah, because it's kind of a long movie, and then they had us back out again for the 4th one. It was a little bit different experience. I remember being like absolutely freezing, but my pants were wrinkled, I guess, and that was like a big deal. That's like what I remember about that version of it, was like my pants were wrinkled, and they kept like coming behind like their backside so you could see behind it. But yeah, super cool. I don't think, and this was like right out of the grab, like. These 2 events you're referencing, I was literally 22 and just had graduated. So I was like, wow, music made your life sweet. Like,
yeah.
And then the second gig that you're referring to is I got to go to India and play with this Oscar-winning composer, A.R. Rahman, who literally wrote the music for Slumdog Millionaire, to tie this back to drum corps.
No big deal.
Yeah, very casual. But I remember, I was like very vividly remember I was like in a like Home Goods, you know, spending money I didn't need to be spending, and Paul Rennick calls, and so I'm like, oh, okay. And the Troopers thing had just happened. Again, 2012 was a good year. I answer the phone thinking it's going to be all Troopers, and he goes, Lauren, do you have a passport? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, I need you to go to India. And I was like, what? Okay. And so that's kind of basically this composer, he wanted like 4 American percussionists, specifically girls, to come and play on his performance. And I just remember, you know, it was around Christmas time, and I was going to join. I can't remember why I had to teach a camp or something, so I flew out a day later than everyone else that ended up doing it. And I remember just getting on the plane and just like, we landed in Saudi Arabia, and I remember getting off the plane and being like so disoriented about like, I don't know where I have no idea where I go, like where's the next plane, and there were folks walking around with like these giant machine guns just like casually in the airport for security. Like, oh, okay. And then I get on my next flight and I land in India and realize I have no idea what I'm supposed to do once I get here. Like I knew I was supposed to deny India, which is in South India, but I didn't actually know, like, was I supposed to meet someone? Like, where do I, like, none of that. I had no phone number.
They gave you no information about any of that?
I just, like, this, like, nice, I remember, like, this lady sitting next to me in the last flight I had, I guess she first off was like, "Oh, your hair is very yellow," and I was like, "Oh, thank you." And she's like, "What do you?"
I think.
Thank you. And she goes, "Well, what are you flying for?" And I told her I was coming to play in this concert, and she totally was like, "Oh my gosh, can you get me tickets?" And I come to find out, like, this composer is like thought of as like the Michael Jackson over there. Like that is
wow.
like. She was just like, "Please, can you get me tickets, Will?" And I was like, "I can't. I'm so sorry, but like, thank you for help." And she helped me like make it to the curb, and so I'm standing there with my bag, just like, I don't really know what to do. And this car rolls up, and they roll the window down. They're like, "Are you Lauren?" I was like, "Yes." And they're like, "Okay, get in." Like, okay. And I just try, I had no other option. I was like, okay.
Yeah, at that point, you're just like, well, hope this works out.
Yeah, but it was so amazing. Like we get, so they drive in. This is the middle of the night. I'd been, it was like a 2-day flight situation. Went from like Dallas to Chicago to New York to Saudi Arabia to Chennai. And it was just like, okay, long day. So I make it there, and they drive up to this like beautiful, like to me, it looked like a palace, like this just giant place. And I walk in, and one of my best friends
Might have been a palace.
Right.
it was a palace to me. It was, and I would get in there, and they give me a key, and I go to the room, and one of my best friends from my undergrad, Kaylee Hardiman, was there, and like it was like such a blast, like getting to do that with her and this girl Adrienne Valderrama, who ended up being in Blast for many years, and two girls that were actually, one was an alumni from Phantom Regiment in 06, Amy Garpick, and her best friend Megan Arms from Eastman were also there, and I credit them really putting the idea of going to grad school in my mind. Like that whole trip, they're just like, "Why don't you go to grad school? Right? Like, what do you think?" And like that totally like solidified it for me. But yeah, it was crazy, and I never really adjusted to the time difference because we would rehearse until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and I remember just being like so sleep deprived, and like, and watching them build this whole set was amazing because like you look behind the stage and it was literally held up by like tree sticks, but the stage, like the MTV Awards, like it was beautiful. And I remember the day of the gig, the like composer came up to me and he goes, "I think I heard you were good at mallets." And I was like, "I think so sometimes." And so he hands me this like lead chart with a bunch of chord changes. He's like, "Okay, can you play vibraphone?" And I totally got to play like on stage in front of 75,000 people, this like vibraphone part. Mind you, it was not that difficult, but like I was sight reading it in front of all these people, and I totally use that story now with my students. I'm like, this is why you need to be good at sight reading, because you never know when you're going to find yourself in front of 75,000 people at a rock concert, sight reading some vibraphone.
That's a pro skill at its finest.
100%.
And so, yeah, incredible experience, really different than anything I've done. And I think I peaked at 22, getting to do a rock concert and playing. There was a marching snare drum, there was taiko drums and vibraphone. Like, when am I ever going to do something like that again? And also getting to be in a movie and to work at the Troopers. So 22, that's the peak, guys.
There it is. It's all downhill from there, everybody.
Well, I would humbly refute that, but in my own personal life. But you definitely had quite
a 22 year,
like back to back to back 22 year. So
yeah,
I won't argue with it.
Pretty solid.
But yeah, I think that hit, like, we knocked out my list pretty hardcore.
That was great.
Unless there's like anything else that you want to roll out, like the red carpet for that you have going on or looking forward to or anything like that.
I wrote a marimba solo. Hype that up so people buy it.
Is that the one? Is that the one on your website? I looked at it, but I did not get a chance to listen to it. It's like 5.5 minutes long, right?
But if you want, we can hype that up. Yeah,
let's do it.
I did that over quarantine. I finally had the time to sit down and record that piece that I started writing, really in my undergrad, and I just never took the time to finish it. And it was a labor of love. It was something that I knew I wanted to do in my undergrad, and started writing and never got past 8 bars because you start taking theory classes and music history, and you realize, wow, all these great composers, my thing sounds not like that. And so I kind of put the pressure on myself to the point of not wanting to write it. And it really took me getting to my graduate studies, and I started painting. As we mentioned earlier, I like the ocean, and so I started painting killer whales. Favorite pastime of mine. I know, so exciting. But I thought, I honestly thought I was good at painting whales, and I have no training in it. Like, I've not taken a painting class. I don't know any technique. I just think, hey, that looks like a whale. Like, seriously, go look at my Instagram. I put paintings up. I think they look like a killer whale. But if I showed it to some art professor, I'm sure they would rip it apart and be like, this technique's terrible.
I'm looking right now.
That's actually ironic considering art is so subjective, but yeah.
But I think there's a correlation there with music. We learn all these techniques and study the great things before us, and it's kind of like what we're talking about, like talking technique versus sound. We talk about, and I talk about techniques that have worked for other artists and learning how to emulate them so you can make your own art. And so going through the process of painting and reminding myself, like, I'm just doing it for me and my enjoyment, it reminded me that, like when I was in middle school and I was like in my all-girl rock band and I would write all the tunes, I just liked writing music and I didn't judge what I was doing back then. I just did it because I liked it. And so it was like in 2 weeks I was able to finish writing that marimba solo. I ended up performing it at my master's degree, which is something I had originally wanted to do in my undergrad. And then fast forward to our lovely quarantine year this year, I found myself a lot of time and thought, well, maybe now is the good time to learn how to record myself. I see all these like 410 Media fancy videos with all the cool camera angles. And I was like, I bet I could do that with my iPhone.
Probably.
Not the same, but I did learn a lot about self-recording and what not to do. But I did, eventually 2 months later than I thought it would take me finish recording it. And at the time I was involved with the Heartland Marimba Quartet, or the percussion ensemble version of it. And they were doing a digital marimba concert. So I submitted that video that I spent probably more hours than someone that knows what they're doing would in terms of recording. But yeah, it was a great experience. I can now talk to my students about what not to do when self-recording.
What's the title of the piece you wrote?
Oh, Just the Light We See. And, another topic on that note is I've learned a lot about self-publishing. I really thought about doing the whole publishing it through, like IP or Tapspace or something. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I think I want to do something about like not owning the rights of something I created felt weird to me. And so I actually, going back to the paintings, I have a Etsy, like the arts and crafts website, and I just listed the marimba solo on there, and it's for direct download, which has been great. I don't have to worry about anything. People can purchase it and they just get a link to download it. I don't have to do anything. So yeah, that was my dip into composing. And, that's a personal goal of mine, is to kind of expand on that and learn more about that whole process.
So
Cool.
If people want to find it, they can find it on Etsy. And then also you have a website, right? laurenteel.org.
I know I'm at an organization. .com was taken, so sorry.
It was taken, and it was definitely not you.
But she is a musician, I will say.
She's a musician, but I was like, this isn't the right website.
Yeah.
So laurenteel, TEEL.org.
I like the color.
What would you, as far as like skill level for somebody who's looking for marimba solo, pretty advanced?
I would think it's pretty advanced, but then one of my friends like, hey, a freshman in high school, I got him playing your solo. And I was like, oh, okay, well, so there's that. But to me, writing that piece, I incorporated a lot of techniques I was working on at the time, like a lot of close seconds, and trying to drop notes in while keeping those close second laterals going. And just, as an undergrad, I really found myself drawn to romantic period marimba or piano literature. Much to my professor's disappointment, who said I was holding our instrument back by playing music. I understand. But I just felt like a lot of literature that was out there was very much drumming focused on a marimba, meaning like there's a lot of like, let's do some paradiddles on some fifths because it feels good, or let's do this permutation over fifths because it feels good, versus like, and don't get me wrong, there's that in my piece too, because I did write it at a keyboard versus at the computer. But I really was more interested in playing things like Chopin or Debussy. And so I think there's some influences with that. Not that I am comparing myself to those composers, but I am saying that those are the things that kind of influenced the form and style of that piece.
Heck yeah. Well, now
Very
I actually
cool.
need to make time to listen to it.
Yeah, right. Me too. Well, I think that's a perfect note to wrap this up on. You two got anything else?
Thanks for having me.
No,
Yeah,
thanks
it was a blast.
Thanks for hanging out. This has been great. So let's close this out. I'll reiterate briefly the spiel from the beginning. Subscribe on YouTube, comment, like, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, whatever you want to do. Patreon.com, Lone Star Percussion, code aged out, save $10. Links in the description for that. Yeah, we'll see everybody next time.
Peace.